Welcome to the continent of Africa's most reliable media platform when it comes to the journey of the continent of Africa's integration agenda. And we have been observing the Secretary General of the AFCFTA Secretariat combing the lengths and breadths of the continent, engaging economic operators about how far we are with the integration agenda of the continent. He was at the port of Mombasa in Kenya. He was at the United Kingdom also engaging the African ambassadors in London and also speaking to the London School of Economics. We should be updating you on all the developments, what he's been telling the folks there this week. We are going to focus on the good news that's been received by the people of Ghana, because the country of Ghana, which is the commercial capital of Africa, has reopened its borders to humans after 2 years of closing the borders due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And mind you, quite a number of other countries have also not reopened their borders yet. So most of Ghana's neighbors, Togo, hasn't reopened its borders yet. So whether Ghana opens its borders or not, the folks from Togo cannot come into Ghana because they haven't reopened. How does this play out? How does it still affect intra-Africa trading and all of that? We will be assessing this with Professor Paul Nugent, a professor of African history at the University of Edinburgh, who has studied the corridors of Africa extensively. Now, the Ecowas Commission held its extraordinary summit here in Accra, Ghana, the commercial capital of Africa, and we all thought that the border reopening was going to be part of the agenda. However, it wasn't part of the agenda. What was actually on the agenda was the political situations in the coup-hit countries within West Africa, and that's Burkina Faso, Mali, and Guinea, and how political transitions can smoothly take place over there. Let's go listen to the president of the ECOWAS Commission, and we'll be back.
The summit was able to take some decision with the objective always to help those countries restore the constitutional order, because this is important for them to deal with the key issues they are facing. The security issues, particularly in the Republic of Mali and in Burkina Faso, the humanitarian issues. The head of state decided that they are willing to provide for an extension of the transition in Mali in a range of 12 to 16 months, in addition to the 18 months that was already passed. On Guinea, in the past, they have been just asking for the timeline to be provided on several occasions, but now, as nothing is coming, now the authority is putting a deadline. They are putting a deadline, and today is March 25th, so they are giving 1 month. April 25th, they would like to see a transition timeline, the Republic of Guinea. In Burkina Faso, as you know, there was also in this country, but specifically on January 24th, 2022, there was a coup d'etat. So those two elements, they asked that for Kabore, President Kabore has to be set free immediately, and also discussion be engaged with the Burkina transition authorities on a timeline for it to be reduced. And then again, they are giving 1 month for this to really bring some result. That means April 25th, and beyond that date, they will have sanctions that will, economic and financial sanctions that will kick in.
Economic and financial sanctions are to be slapped on Burkina Faso, Mali, and Guinea should they fail to meet the deadlines that have been outlined by the president of the ECOWAS Commission there. And as you can tell, the border reopening was not on the agenda of the ECOWAS Commission when it met for the extraordinary summit. However, the insecurity or the security and political situations in those coup-hit countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Guinea, were the most concerned issues that they had over there. However, this week we are going to focus on some good news to the Republic of Ghana, because this country, Ghana, which is the commercial capital of Africa, has reopened its land borders to humans. You remember that about 2 years ago, when the COVID pandemic hit the globe, lots of countries closed their borders, lots of African countries, including Ghana. So the borders have been shut for the past 2 years. Now the borders of Ghana have been opened. On Sunday, March 27, 2022, Ghana's President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo announced the reopening of Ghana's land and sea borders to people 2 years after it was closed due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
As from tomorrow, Monday, the 28th March, all land and sea borders will be opened. Fully vaccinated travelers will be allowed entry through the land and sea borders without a negative PCR test result from the country of origin. Citizens and foreign residents in Ghana who are not fully vaccinated will have to produce a negative 48-hour PCR test result and will be offered vaccination on arrival.
Meanwhile, the Aflao border has been given some colorful facelift, as at the time it was open to humans on Monday morning. And the Ghana Sector Commander of Immigration at the Aflao border said the closure affected the service financially.
The revenue we generate in the form of visa, emergency visas on arrival, penalties for overstay and others, it goes to the government, and then immigration has a percentage that we retain. Now that we are not collecting such revenues, definitely we will not have the expected revenue.
He said it will require Togo to also reopen its borders to bring life to normalcy.
We also pray and hope that the Togo side will also open, because if they don't open, the travelers cannot come as anticipated.
He explained that the service is vigilant to secure the land borders.
We are vigilant on the ground to ensure that no persons will take advantage of opening and then come and cause any mayhem.
The sector commander assured that they have enough officers to man the main borders.
I believe we have enough men on the ground assigned to the main border, then the beats and the pillars.
Residents of the border town of Aflao are of the view that though it's exciting that Ghana has reopened its end of the border, they will feel the full impact when the Togo end of the border is reopened. Now, what does this mean? Because we still understand that quite a number of Ghana's neighboring countries, those that they share borders with, still have their borders closed. Because the folks in Togo, for instance, can still come into Ghana. The folks in Ghana still can't go to Togo if the borders in Togo are not opened. So we want to look at the dynamics and why has it even taken Africa all this while to reopen its borders. And we, the single African market, about a year ago, paid a visit to Aflao, the border town of Ghana that links the Republic of Togo. And the economic operators there, as well as the residents in that border town, complain bitterly about the hardship that is going on there and the fact that all the economic activities are just going down like that. We want you to take a listen to that particular piece. We will come back and speak to Professor Paul Nugent. On arrival at Aflao, Ghana's border town with the Republic of Togo, the town looked much inactive compared to its usual and otherwise bustling border town Aflao is known for, with very low trading activities compared with what it used to be prior to the emergence of COVID-19 pandemic and the subsequent closure of the borders. The streets of Aflao are quite dull compared to the usual. We're going to come back when the borders are open to see and show you the pictures between the two scenarios. But at the moment, because the borders are closed, not a lot of people are here. The motorbikers are complaining that they can't get people to commute, so they're also not getting jobs. It's a dull place, I must say. The bus stations had a lot of buses still waiting for passengers. Traders, service providers and residents say the border closure has virtually taken the life away from the Aflao we had always known it to be.
when the border is closed like this, it is not easy for the people to come and bought the bus for us so that we too we can load our bus.
Togo musuna kokoye juma ansan ye didi ba esi ababie woni ho chiri too much ame come die
Aflao company bi ni antin boy se wa na nyina Togo mu na ye den yetimi kope kakraba ye ma me no mu nyina o moduane na asefo nyina free Togo mu ansan e ba ntino boda na atu na ma nyama bo aye so aye den
ye kofa wo inu koton asa na didi yes mu go brother ni mai
bas bebre sisi asa ebi mu abedi 3 weeks nyina bosumi warate ohun adwuma na entwa yie
twabasi sesi ya nyina ya biaba yenya lodunko.
They say the situation has made life unbearable at the hitherto dynamic border town.
On entrée de souffrir, là où on est maintenant, même pour aller au marché, pour aller acheter quelque chose, il n'y a pas d'argent. Même l'eau glacée qu'on vend, l'eau glacée, on ne paye pas. Maintenant, qu'est-ce qu'on va faire? Il faut nous regarder le vieux dame là. Notre mari est mort. Moi, là où je suis, mon mari est mort. Je n'ai pas de mari. Mais j'ai 5 enfants. 8 enfants, 8 petits enfants. Comment je vais faire?
No vous dernier mi ate samia bo mi akpon dudu mi ado dia tutu mu shan lock na mi fu pan la Aflao boda e ko du mi akatamila e boda le tu mi amore mi ba bi school ati moji ala ba boda na mu vu na ma modro va na nya majana ya bre atiti o obi an komba ye ton ade a ye nto e comedy ye wa ha say everything scatter. He over the gaji over the vituquiaji or to the vituquia the gaji how to Tamia akpa emidra akpa doku be emidra ko na Togo and the shadow kwami kwe Togo me tami de kuku mi komia po maula for na mitare mi pere mi achinwa hu de anemi de gamia ha mi atek pomvire de mi aduro.
We were informed that many travelers now resort to unapproved routes.
Yeah, there are unapproved routes. There are more places that people can come in. They will come in to buy their things and go back. But when we don't pass through the borders, it will not help the people. Because when you're passing through that places, you can't buy a lot and pass there.
Standing behind the ties like this, I'm in Togo, and I walk in here. I arrive in Ghana peacefully and nicely, where I was coming from. That's the high streets of Lomé. So the question is, who are we deceiving? People would definitely move. Now, the young kid there is playing in the no man's land and crossing to Ghana. A lot of people would also cross beyond the tie into Togo and come back into Ghana. People are moving nonetheless.
Bon, on est en train de demander le pardon, la République de Ghana. Bon, nous, on est ici, donc on rentre au Togo. C'est au Togo qu'on fait notre travail, tout c'est au Togo. Donc ils ont fermé la frontière depuis là. Pour rentrer au Togo, on est en train de souffrir ici. On est en train de souffrir.
Pardon à le gouvernement ghanéen de nous faire de toutes sortes pour ouvrir les frontières parce qu'on a souffert. On a beaucoup souffert même. Et il y a nos enfants qui vont à l'école au Togo, il y a des enfants qui sont au Togo qui vont à l'école au Ghana. Et nous travaillons aussi, on travaille au Togo, il y a d'autres qui travaillent dans le Ghana. Maintenant, comme ils ont fermé les frontières, on n'a pas le droit d'aller au Ghana ou bien au Togo pour aller travailler.
Can we now begin to look at protocols that will fight the COVID instead of preventing people from crossing from one country into the other, especially when these countries are AFCFTA party state, hoping to quickly get back to shape and begin to trade among themselves?
COVID in India, wabaso wani yabatina. No mumfa solution bia. Ababuaye ma COVID no, wabaso wani yabatina. Yesu yene ne bere, yesu yene ne batina. Ba yakazi yetu border no mu dia. We
would like the government to put in measures, COVID-19 measures, at the borders in collaboration with the Togolese authorities so that they will all follow the same format in checking people who come in and leave the country.
Few small-scale traders and porters who were seen using the border after returning from trading in Togo for the day said the situation has made life more difficult and solutions need to be found as soon as possible.
Les achats, tout est devenu compliqué. Sinon, nous prions vraiment que vous ouvrez la frontière pour nous. Et on vous en prie d'ouvrir la frontière, sinon ça ne va pas. Parce que le Togo et le Ghana, tout est changé. Beaucoup de choses ont changé. Et nous prions vraiment que nous changeons et vous nous aidez à changer. Il faut que vous ouvriez les frontières.
The border closure is affecting business. Nothing is moving. Everything is at standstill. No business is flowing. The exporters are not coming in.
Some of us, the AJB crossing over to Togo is a very difficult, situation that we always face now. So, and it has actually bring hardship to we, the free forwarders, the people who, other stakeholders around us who are also facing these challenges.
Meanwhile, some freight forwarders at the Aflao border are calling for intensive sensitization of the AFCFTA.
The traders are to be educated, to be taken through the process. How it should be, exporters, importers, and even freight forwarders should be taken through all over the country. It shouldn't be centralized in only Accra. It should be decentralized.
The freight forwarders and AFCFTA advocates say it is about time Aflao is giving a facelift as a border town.
COVID-19 has taught us a very big lesson that there's a need for infrastructure. Most of the borders lack infrastructure financing. They don't have there's a lot of land space around where our borders are, but it's not developed. We need to develop a lot of facilities, waiting rooms, clinics, isolation centers, laboratories even at the borders, because we don't know the next pandemic. Then your issue of security comes. We need to have strong security, both being police side or military or at all borders, to ensure that there is a lot of calm. Then adopt technology, drones, taking border monitoring.
We undertook that particular assignment at the Aflao border about a year ago, and the residents as well as the economic operators of that border town complained bitterly. Now, a year ago, I again engaged Professor Paul Nugent, Professor of African History, very familiar with the Aflao border as well as the West African corridor, to find out from him whether it was even necessary at that time that we had our borders closed. And that was a year after the COVID pandemic had hit the globe. And he thought that no.
Governments tend to regard border towns as a problem of various kinds, and Aflao is a classic example. It's always put in a category of its own, that Aflao is a place that is attracting people from other countries who are not really Ghanaians and so on. So it is seen as a problem, instead of looking at it in the opposite way and saying, well, actually, Aflao is an example of how a kind of regional integration from below actually works. And if I was sort of thinking about what I would be doing if I was in government at any point, which I never will, it would actually be investing in cross-border infrastructure, linking populations within border regions where there's a potential to have a form of regional integration that works. Rather than governments getting in the way and trying to impede, governments should be doing the opposite. They should be opening their borders and they should be putting in the kinds of infrastructure that enables border populations to have a better synergy with one another.
He says border towns like Aflao are growing at rapid rates and therefore has the greatest potential to integrate neighboring countries. Thus, should be the focus of government.
What governments should be doing is trying to put in place the physical infrastructure to encourage border markets, but also removing all the impediments that prevent traders from crossing to attend markets on one side to the other. And these markets are interconnected. So if you take the one that interests me, for example, the Agoutimés, they have a market in Petwe, they have a market in Amuzukoji in Togo, but the Petwe market is in turn linked to the home market. So goods flow through these markets within the sub-region completely under the radar.
Well, that was Professor Paul Nugent a year ago. However, as a country and even as a continent, we couldn't defy the requirements from the World Health Organization. So we kept our borders closed. But we've kept it closed for almost a year after that particular interview and 2 years since the COVID pandemic hit. Now, in the United Kingdom, where Professor Paul Nugent is a citizen and coming from, the restrictions on the COVID-19 have been lifted recently, in spite of the fact that even the Queen of England recently had COVID. They have taken all the restrictions away, no borders are closed or whatsoever. So we have begun having conversation. Is it still important that we keep our borders closed because it is affecting economic activities between countries on this particular West African corridor, and it's bringing a lot of economic hardships, as you may have heard over there. So is it important that we keep it close? I got back to Professor Paul Nugent, the professor of African history, to find out what he thinks 2 years after the COVID-19 pandemic and 1 year after he thought that we should have had our borders open. We had the conversation about a year ago, and you had suggested that even at that point, it was about time that the continent of Africa opens its borders in spite of the COVID and all of that. And we are a year on, we still have many African countries that have not opened their borders. Do you know any African country that has opened its borders? Apart from Ghana? For humans, I mean.
Yeah, although that distinction is a very artificial distinction. About a month ago, Uganda and Rwanda announced that they had reopened that border, and things were starting to move again. People were beginning to move. That one had been closed quite firmly, partly for political reasons.
What do you make of the fact that it took the continent so long to come to terms with opening the borders?
I think a lot of it has got to do with sheer inertia, especially within the Ecowas sub-region, because it was a kind of collective decision to close the border. Then you've got to get everybody to agree to reopen it, which is a very long, complicated process. I think that's part of the reason. I think it's partly also the case that governments don't like open borders, despite the rhetoric. Actually, they're quite comfortable. Yeah, as long as the important stuff is flowing through, as long as the cargo is moving, governments feel actually happier in some ways about having a closed border. I think that's one reason why in the case of Ghana, there was so little push on the part of government to open the borders in this last 12 months.
But one would assume that it doesn't help trade, particularly movement of people, physical movement of people. If you close these borders, although you announce that cargoes can move, but cargoes go with the humans. So why would you take delight in just shutting the borders? What would make any nation delight in shutting their borders?
Well, it shows that they're not really that interested in the trade that is not related to transit and cargo. That's the stuff that brings in the money at the port. That's the stuff that brings in customs revenue. And I think from the point of view of central government, what other kinds of trade goes on across borders is of less interest to them. It's less of interest to them because they don't count it, of course. So there's all this trade that we know that takes place in border areas. Because it's not properly counted, nobody knows how much it's really worth and therefore how important it is. And I think that's a large part of it. And when push comes to shove, governments can always, or at least people within governments, could always claim that there's a national security interest, so that we should be very careful about reopening the border because of the danger of armaments and stuff, crossing borders. So whenever there's an argument in favor of opening borders, there's always the counter argument, well, yes, but we've got to be very slow and careful and cautious, especially with what's going on in the Sahel. About reopening borders. So that contributed, I think, to the inertia.
The fact that we don't have enough accurate data on trade through the land borders, do you think that could also be a contributing factor? Because if you take the sea ports, for instance, or if you take the airspace, for instance, you can actually put together a data and say this amount of trade is coming out of there. But we don't seem to have accurate data coming from the land borders, and so we assume not much trade goes through there. Intra-Africa trade, for instance, we have all calculated it to be around 14 to 16% thereabout. As a matter of fact, it may be way higher because there are a lot of informal trade and there are a lot of unrecorded trade that go through the land borders. Don't you think this could also contribute to the inertia?
Definitely. in East Africa, when the Bank of Uganda started sitting on the borders and counting the amount of trade that was going on, they discovered that there's far more cross-border trade than is captured in the national statistics by the customs authorities, by the revenue authorities. And I think if you did the same thing for any of West Africa's borders, you would have a very different profile in terms of the amount of trade that is taking place, the amount of economic activity that spins off, and therefore the importance of border economies, which at the moment are relegated to the margins or seen as a problem. Border regions are seen as a problem rather than as something that should be actively looked at and supported.
So we've closed our borders for almost 2 years now. To what extent do you think this can affect the economies of African countries? And if you take Ghana, which you are very familiar with, for instance, to what extent do you think it can impact on our economy?
You could take the long view and the short view. The short view is if you reopen the border, things will get back to normal fairly quickly. I think that's true. But if you take the long view, regional integration was already in trouble before these borders were closed. We've got to remember that Nigeria had unilaterally decided to close its borders with its neighbors before COVID, or at least with Benin before COVID. So the most important regional economic power, sitting on supposedly the continent's most important transport corridor, had blocked it off. And that's not going to go away simply by declaring that COVID is over and we can go back to normality. If governments are not taking regional integration seriously, you're not really going to get much further. I mean, you'll have a temporary sort of blip where things sort of seem to pick up again, but the structural problems remain. They have not been dealt with.
Yeah. Now, I'm happy you talk about regional integration because, as you know, January 1st, 2021, the implementation of the AfCFTA officially commenced, and hoping that physical movement of goods across the borders within Africa should take place within this year. How do you think these closures have impacted on this whole vision of the continent integrating its market and the implementation of the AfCFTA?
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly slowed everything down. But then maybe that in itself was not such a bad thing, because I think the AfCFTA was accelerating much faster than the capacity of governments to actually implement. So in a way, taking things a little bit more slowly is not such a bad idea. But the problem with the Continental Free Trade Area is that it doesn't address the question of, if national governments have not respected regional integration initiatives, why should they be willing to accept a continental initiative where the enforcement is even more difficult in many ways than it would be at a regional level? And when it comes to simple things like rules of origin on goods produced within the region, within Ecowas, it's been a real nightmare for anybody trying to produce goods, say, in Cote d'Ivoire and sell them in Nigeria.
Really? Has it been a nightmare?
Well, according to people who try and trade goods, the Nigerian customs authorities very often will not accept the rules of origin that supposedly have been verified through Ecowas. And this is has been a massive disincentive to trade within the West African subregion. So all that'll happen, you might imagine, is a similar thing might unfold at a continental level, unless there's enough pressure and unless there's enough enforcement or enough in an enforcement mechanism to ensure that states abide by the rules that they've signed up to at the continental level. We know that some countries have been quite reluctant to sign up in the first place, but they've had to sign up in the sense because everyone else was doing it. But that doesn't, to me, speak to a commitment actually to the agreement. But we'll see. I mean, it's early days, but I can't see any reason why something that didn't work at a regional level should now work because it's at the continental level. In fact, quite the opposite. You would think that there would be greater structural problems with enforcement at the continental level.
No, but the fact that, for instance, ETLS is working relatively, it might not be working to perfection, but the Ecowas trade liberalization scheme is fairly working, and some goods of a sort are moving under the ETLS, except the fact that, we have one or two countries, like you mentioned. Benin, for instance, is not allowing goods, transit goods, to go through their country without paying duty, and some of those few issues here and there. Nigeria had issues with rice importation from Benin, and which led to the closure of their borders to the rest of the countries and all of that. Do you think that these individual pockets of issues here and there has a tendency to affect the continental vision?
Yeah, I mean, at the region level, there was strong lobbying by certain economic interests to delay the full implementation of the ETLS, which meant that it didn't work as it should have done. But there have also been sort of other ways of achieving protectionist ends without necessarily saying that you're going to be protectionist. Transit fees and various forms of other forms of charges placed upon goods that are being traded within the region. Those things are not so easy to sweep away. And when you look at the value of a particular commodity, there are a whole series of cost components that go with that, and it's possible to create disincentives in other kinds of areas that enable you to protect the goods in your home market. And I think that's a game that states will continue to play rather. And I come back to the enforcement mechanism. So if a country that has signed up to the Continental Free Trade Agreement is being somehow laggardly, not fully implementing, subverting, what is the mechanism for forcing them to abide by the rules? I wonder whether the Secretariat has the capacity to enforce.
Well, they've talked about the dispute settlement mechanism that they're hoping that it should be able to address most of these difficulties, hopefully when practical movement of goods and practical implementation take off. Let me find out from you whether, in your view, or we can attribute some economic hardships within the various nations on the continent to some of these border closures, because in Ghana, for instance, it's one of the measures that is being put in place to address the recent economic difficulties that has been widely accepted within the country. Do you reckon that the border closures could have contributed to some of these economic difficulties that we're facing?
Yeah, I mean, they've contributed to the economic difficulties of those countries which are landlocked and which depend on goods being transported mostly by road. They've definitely been affected, and that's reflected in higher prices for consumer goods. That you compound that, of course, with the current conjuncture of rising oil prices, therefore rising fuel prices, and in a continent where everything is moved by road, very little is moved by rail or by water. That has an additional knock-on effect on landlocked states. So yeah, definitely. I mean, it has, and it's had also a very important impact on people living in border regions, which is a very large percentage of the regional population.
Yeah. And have you seen anything similar within the European Union or from the United Kingdom where you are?
Well, of course, we left the European Union, and we've seen rising prices, all kinds of blockages at borders, and so on. So the people who argued that Brexit was going to be a relatively easy ride, I think, were misleading the public. Actually, it's not been an easy ride at all, and the prices of everything have gone up.
I see.
But I still think that if one's comparing the EU minus the UK and the continent of Africa, I mean, I think there are still some valid lessons to be learned from European integration. Things looked quite dodgy at the time when COVID broke out and states within the European Union were somehow not on the same page. But I think many of those problems were resolved. And the one thing the EU has, which I think is of relevance, particularly to West Africa, but to the rest of the continent as well, is the importance of taking cross-border regionalism seriously. So thinking beyond borders and thinking of what benefits would flow from investing in regional economies, in border regional economies. And that has not yet begun, I think, in West Africa, because so much of it has been based on, the thinking has been based on transport corridors, which are about flows between ports and cities and mining areas, which leave out border regions completely.
Yeah. What would you think that should be the measures that we can take as a continent, and countries like Ghana or West African countries can take, as we all prepare to open our borders and bounce back to normalcy?
I would say think seriously about infrastructural investments. Don't be throwing large amounts of money at infrastructure just because it's infrastructure. Ghana has got itself into problems for many reasons, but one of which is that it's spent massively on infrastructure, which doesn't necessarily bring much of a return. And if you think, going back to this point about road transport, almost everything is transported by road. At a time of climate change and whatever, but also at times of rising fuel prices. Is road transport a really cost-effective way of going? Ghana has a massively underutilized, almost unutilized water transport system. And that's a case for political reasons. So within a country like Ghana, you can think about where, what would be a wise way to spend your money, but also to think about how you could really take regional integration seriously, way beyond transport corridors, but think about what you could do to make it easier for people to trade goods across borders, easier to make it for manufacturers to sell their goods within the sub-region, easier for people living in border regions to trade goods. And I'm thinking of agricultural goods. Why should there be so much food imported that could, be produced within the sub-region if many of the disincentives were removed? So I think there's a lot that could be done, but thinking about things in a slightly different way to what has been done up until now.
And you're advocating that we take inland waterways and river transportation very seriously as a country?
Most definitely. They're doing it, or they're starting to do it in East Africa now, where they're opening up a whole new ferry service on Lake Victoria, which should bring major benefits. It'll bring down the cost of moving goods from the port to somewhere like Uganda or Rwanda by a vast amount. In the case of Ghana, you've got the Volta Lake is sitting there, not being used, and it would be far cheaper to move goods along the lake than it would be to use them by road, apart from all the negative things that come with roads, or at least cargo moving along roads.
Between water transportation or inland waterways, means of transport, and railways, which of them would you recommend that we focus a lot of attention on as building infrastructures immediately?
People like railways because they look nice and new and fancy and whatever. Railways have a role to play, but only, I would say, in conjunction with water transport and a certain amount of road transport. So the Volta Lake would work well with railways, and I guess that's part of the reason for part of the rail development. Rail is costing Ghana a lot at the moment with no return. And if you look at the sequencing for when these things are supposed to happen, I mean, Ghana is putting up a lot of money up front without any return. It might have been better to have done it in a slightly different way, but in the long run, I think railways are the way forward. But water transport, railways without developing water transport doesn't to me make any sense.
So that was Professor Paul Nugent from the Department of African History, University of Edinburgh. Very strong views about some of the actions that are being taken and some of the inactions that are being taken. Now, we believe that some of these perceptions, some of these views are very critical to shape our thinking. We see those ones that we can disappoint, the perceptions that we can disappoint, those that we can take on board to shape our whole integration agenda. Now, we have been placing a lot of attention on innovators, entrepreneurs, and see how best we can encourage them to continue to do a lot more. And as I have announced before, in the coming episodes, we will be bringing from state agencies, from institutions that are mandated to support innovators, entrepreneurs, to tell us a lot more what packages, what are the offerings that some of these entrepreneurs and innovators can take advantage of. But this week, we're going to focus on a young man who graduated from one of Ghana's prestigious universities, the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. And even back at that university, he was a shoemaker. Today, he's a professional shoemaker, designing very wonderful African shoes with African fabric, with jute backs and all of that, exporting them to neighboring African countries, making a living out of that and employing people. And he believes that he's landed the professional career that he so desired.
My name is Joel Wilson, a product of Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. I'm a shoemaker. I started this job during 2007 on campus with only 100 cedis. After my national service, I decided to go into it full-time, bought some machines and started working because there wasn't a lot of products or African products that had this African touch and then African design. So I decided to employ the techniques of using the African prints to make this kind of slippers. But normally the ones that we had on the market were not very durable. So I had to solve the problem of introducing leather, using the leather to do the lining. I decided to change the kind of work that we do here in Africa. But I decided to try other products that's using African prints and then jute. And then this is a jute slippers, but it's jute tie and dye. And then macrame. This is a macrame technique to make this beautiful gladiator sandals. Beside that, I also do bags, but then I make sure the bags are not just African print bags. They are lined, so when it's dirty, you can wash it. Because normally we have notions that things that are made in Ghana or made in Africa are not durable, but then durability is key here when we are producing. So you can use it, and then people who buy from my shop normally can testify to that. Sometimes people will tell me, oh, I bought this thing from a shop and then when it rained, it came off. So we make sure whatever we do here is very durable so that the customer will be happy and can use the products for like 2 or 3 years before it gets spoiled. Beside that, I also have kit slippers. These are made from African prints. That's like the kente and then leather. I use the leather to pipe it so that it becomes very durable and you can wash it. Sometimes I speak to my friends who are fashion designers and I take their pieces and then out of the pieces, I try and make something nice from it so that it will help also to save the environment. This is from normal leather and then this is from wooden cloth. So we always try our best to utilize what is around us so that our local industries can also grow here. I've also trained people, especially skilled people who are into beading, who are into dressmaking, bag making, because people come and then some of them, most of them sometimes are professionals already, but they want to adapt to whatever they do. So they come, let's take it like beading, they come and oh, help me, I want to know how to, when I'm finished with the beading, I can make the soles and stuff. So those who are into beading, I help them so that they can learn how to use the beading to make like slippers and then sandals. Others also come to me. Those who are into fashion designing, they come and they want to learn how to make bags and stuff. So in terms of that, I've been able to help a lot of people, train people who are now practicing it. Besides that, as an industry, I've grown to the extent that with the capacity to produce about 500 pieces of slippers a month if I'm given the contract. Besides that, this is the job I've been doing since I graduated from school, and I'm married with 2 kids, so this is what's taking care of the family. I have customers who have been with me for the past 10 years, and I have regular customers who come from like Germany and the UK. I have regular customers who come like yearly or every 2 years. They come and buy products from me because of my quality of products. And then some of them also come to me, maybe they see something online, they like it, and then they just take a snap and then they send it to me to produce for them. With the bags, normally what we used to have in town is bags that are made and glued, just glued to other stuff. But this one is not just glued, it's made from the scratch. I make sure I cut them. So this one, for instance, when it's dirty, you can really like wash it and then dry it and reuse it. So I make sure whatever I give you or whatever comes out from my shop is very quality. Customers, I don't really have problem with customers because normally when they are buying from me, they know what I pride myself is in quality. Because normally when it's quantity and it's not quality, the market will not come. But when it's quality, normally I get like in 6 or 1 year or 2 years, and they need something for their engagements, their weddings, or their special program. They just give me a call. Joe, just design something nice for me, and then I do that for them. With the macrame slippers, because of its uniqueness, and it's because it's all hand woven, it's very durable, and a lot of work goes into it. And you only get it from my shop. A lot of people buy from my shop and then they enjoy it because it can really last for 5-6 years. And then when it's dirty, you just rinse it. With my leather product, I try and make sure that whatever we are producing from here is also very neat, because we have a notion that sometimes what is made in Africa, or it's not very durable or to the top. But trust me, these days artisans in Africa are doing very well. So you see from the stitches and the finishing, I make sure the finishing and everything is very neat. Sometimes when I want to sell to someone outside the country, I think it would be better if we have a platform that we can just buy something from there and then it can just go to other countries without you going through the stress of paying huge duties to post something to someone outside our borders. Our vision as a company is to produce over 5,000 products of slippers and then bags to send across African countries. And then our vision is also to train other young guys in the neighborhood so that we will limit unemployment. With the help of bigger industrial machines, we can produce more to reach the African continent. Our vision also is to have a platform or a site or a delivery service that when customers or shops outside Africa buy from us and then they want it to be delivered to them, it will be easier for us, because I have customers in Uganda and Ivory Coast who sometimes they buy from me, but upon using the product, they want to buy and sell in their countries. But when you talk to them about the cost of maybe sending 1,000 pairs of slippers to Uganda or Ivory Coast, the cost involved in terms of duty to send my products to them becomes a problem. So I wish with the help of other institutions and after, we can create a platform for entrepreneurs and businessmen in Ghana so that we can also produce and freely trade across the African country. With the introduction of AFTA in Africa, I think it's going to help us as businessmen and young entrepreneurs to expand and also to push our products further, because it's going to take all the limitation in our business, because someone can freely easily buy something, and then with the help of AFTA, I can easily send it to the person. It doesn't matter the quantity, because there will be the cutoff from duties and stuff. So it will help us as African entrepreneurs and businessmen to also push our products and then help us so that we can trade freely.
So we say a big congratulations to Joel Wilson for the bold initiative, for the very innovative ideas, creating those beautiful shoes, beautiful bags, taking them to Uganda, taking them to other African countries, even beyond that to the United Kingdom, supplying people beyond Ghana and all of that. Now, we believe that the likes of Joel ought to be encouraged. Now, if you listen to him carefully, he said something and opened up a business opportunity. He says Ghana Post or any other system can create a platform where they can supply their products, and their product will be transported to the neighboring African countries. Now, looking at the courier services, already a lot of people advertise on social media. They use Okada here and there to deliver them. Is Ghana Post looking at how best they can support some of these entrepreneurs to take their wares to other African countries as a form of courier services? That is what Joel is suggesting, for instance. He's also talked about the standards and the quality of his bags, Ghana Standards Authority and all of that. Can somebody step in to support Joel, the likes of Joel, to meet the quality and the standard that we all desire so that he can continue to remain competitive? His shoes will be #1. It will stand the test of time and it will stand competition. This is why we do this, to encourage them to continue to do more. If you are doing something remarkable, we would love to hear from you, as always, through our various social media platforms, and we will endeavor to share them with the rest of the continent. Now, coming up next, the weather report for all African cities, as well as the flight schedules from the commercial capital of Africa, the forex rate for the African market, and the AFCFTA party status. So as I hinted, in the coming episode, we will be hearing from the Ghana Enterprise Agency regarding the plans that they have, the interventions that they have for innovators, for entrepreneurs, and all the things that they have already been doing. Who even qualifies as an entrepreneur? Who can venture into entrepreneurship? Who is an innovator? And all of that we should be hearing from the Chief Executive Officer of the Ghana Enterprise Agency in the coming episode. And you can't afford to miss it, because you need to listen, know what is available for you, know what is in the offering, so that you can take advantage of it and also be able to create something, innovate, get involved in entrepreneurship, and be impacted by the AFCFTA positively. Thank you for watching the program. Now, I hope to see you same time next week.
In the name of great Africa, is the fight and conquer now. Forever, in the name of great Africa, there is victory. Forever, in the name of great Africa.